Our story takes place on a small island in the South Pacific named Tanna. The island is approximately 25 miles long and 12 miles wide. Mount Yasur, an active volcano, resides in the southern half of the island. In August of 1774, Captain James Cook was drawn to the island by the glow of the volcano. As a result, he was the first European to discover the island, and when he landed on the southern tip of the island, he named it Port Resolution after his ship, the HMS Resolution. He later named the island Tanna, which means earth in the native language. It's thought that when Cook asked the indigenous people for the name of the island, that he might have pointed at the ground. The natives would have thought he was asking for the name of the ground, and so they told him it was the earth, or Tanna. It wasn't long before the Europeans began trying to Christianize and dominate the islanders, especially the Presbyterian missionaries. For example, take this clip from In the Land of Strangers, A Century of European Contact with Tanna, 1774 to 1874. The process reached its apotheosis with the missionaries who fashioned the Tannese into beasts descending to the grave, untaught of life to come, unsanctified, unsaved, turned them into the poor descendants of Ham, lying in the lowest state of degradation, trodden down by the iron heel, portrayed them like the heathen of old as exceedingly ignorant, vicious, and bigoted, and almost void of natural affection. More than any other group of Europeans, the missionaries negated the distinctive features of being Tannese, incorporating them totally into their own scheme of things. To the evangelical missionaries of the 19th century, everything about the Tannese, past, present, and future, was known. They were heathen who had strayed into darkness, and it was the missionaries' divinely ordained task to bring them back to the path of righteousness. In fulfilling this task, some missionaries would stop at nothing. John G. Paton went to the length of calling in a British gunboat to bomb the Tannese into submission. The action was extreme and scandalous, but it was also consistent with the overall attempt of the missionaries to remake the New Hebrideans after their own image. And the islanders remember it much the same way. Here they are reenacting their story for a documentary.
We were frightened but fascinated. Your ships were as large as floating villages. We had heard stories from our ancestors that you had an appetite for human flesh and blew smoke from your mouth. But then you showed us things that we had never believed could have existed. That these objects could be made by man seemed a miracle. You said that they could be ours too, if we came to work for you.
It's a matter of form at present, that no one understands the nature of the contract, because no one speaks any language common to us. I cannot even find out their names.
It's but a law of nature, surely, that the weak should serve the strong. Besides, is it not obvious from the very thickness of their hides, from the impervious quality of their skulls, into which no light has ever been known to penetrate, that this is the purpose for which the Creator has intended them, to be mere hewers of wood and drawers of water?
They're employed throughout Queensland on plantations, working 10 to 14-hour days, underfed and short of water. They're dying like flies.
So we cut the white man's cane, and if we lived, years later we returned to our islands, only to find that you had come back, this time to stay.
During World War II, the United States military used Tanna and the surrounding islands in their campaign against Japan. In essence, the US military would occupy some of these small islands and use them as a launching pad for the future invasion of Japan. The islanders had never seen the level of technology that the United States military had access to. They were exposed to things like modern medicine, airplanes, and canned food. This cargo was much different and far more advanced than what they'd seen during the British occupation of their island, and they began to meld their previous beliefs with these new experiences. For example, the islanders once believed that a god lived in their volcano, but now they began to believe that a mysterious GI named John Frum resided there also, who they believed was an extension of the god that lived in Mount Yasur. But why John Frum? Where did that name come from? Was he a real live GI? Nobody knows for sure, but it's thought that the name John Frum might have been another miscommunication, much like James Cook might have misunderstood what the Tannese were saying when he asked them what their island was named, while pointing at the ground. It's thought that perhaps John Frum comes from someone describing themselves as John from America. Regardless of the origin of the name, the John Frum Cargo Cult was born.
And you said a little bit before the show that this religion kind of helped unite the community there, right?
Yeah, yeah. I think it's really a really sort of interesting contradiction that the film talks about, because although they do sort of raise the American flag and march around like U.S. soldiers, it is also sort of based on this idea that they're preserving their traditional culture through that. And it sounds, kind of bizarre, but basically, during the 40s, the people there were really repressed, and the church had come in, and they had been colonialized by Britain and France, and a lot of their traditional, rituals and beliefs were being suppressed. So they were really looking for some way to kind of get out of that. And the Americans just happened to arrive and build these bases at this very perfect time where they were looking for a miracle, and so they got it, and the indigenous people kind of found strength, and the Americans changed the balance of power in the regions.
Chief Isaac and other local leaders say that John Frum first appeared one night in the late 1930s, after a group of elders had downed many shells of kava as a prelude to receiving messages from the spirit world. He was a white man who spoke our language, but he didn't tell us then he was an American, says Chief Kawaya, leader of Yakal village. John Frum told them he had come to rescue them from the missionaries and colonial officials. John told us that all Tanna's people should stop following the white man's ways, Chief Kawaya says. He said we should throw away their money and clothes, take our children from their schools, stop going to church and go back to living as caste-on people. We should drink kava, worship the magic stones, and perform our ritual dances. And this is exactly what they did, even though the colonial authorities were not pleased. They arrested the movement's leaders and placed them in prison, which led to the John Frum movement's first martyrs. The islanders believed that John Frum was a messiah, and they thought that if they remained faithful to John, that he would return one day with lots of cargo. In order to entice their messiah to return, the faithful began to carry out rituals, such as creating airfields on the island and marching like the American soldiers had before their departure. In fact, every year on February 15th, natives of Tanna Island hold a celebration in honor of their messiah, John Frum.
Some people criticize us, and they say that we've waited a long time for John's promises. Too long. But this is exactly like the Bible. You go to church, you pray, and those things you ask for, they don't come easy. But John, he promised two specific things. He said that one day the Americans would come, and we know that they did come. So we know he's telling the truth. And John also says, if you obey my orders, I will come again.
I hope you enjoyed the video. I was supposed to make and release this video about 3 weeks ago in tandem with Genetically Modified Skeptics' video, How Quacks Imitate Science, the Cargo Cult Science of Creationism and Alternative Medicine. However, I have a notoriously short attention span, and I wasn't ready at the agreed upon time. For that I owe GM an apology, but I hope you, dear watcher, will shoot on over and watch it if you haven't already. I also wanted to add something else, which I'm loath to do. If you enjoyed this video and wish to see me upload ones like it more frequently, I hope that you'll consider making a donation to my channel through Patreon or Maker Support. The links are in the description box. I recently had a conversation with my fiancée, and to make a long story short, she said that if I could somehow reach $800 per month through YouTube for 3 consecutive months, I could work part-time at my current job. In other words, I could work 20 hours per week instead of my current 40 plus hours per week, and spend more time making videos like this one. I could also devote more time into my podcast. Now, if you're unable to support the channel, or are fine with the number of uploads I can currently put out, then please don't donate. I hate to even ask, and I certainly don't want you going without some necessity or even a luxury you might want. No matter whether you donate or not, I'll still make videos and enjoy doing it. However, if you can spare a few bucks a month and enjoy my videos enough to support them financially, I would be forever grateful for that support. If I do reach that magical threshold, I also plan on revamping the Patreon rewards, But the reality on the ground right now is that I don't have a lot of spare time to spend carrying out the reward system. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. Take care and cheers.